podcast.
Of a human spirit, don't matter what you're facing, we head just one way, into the storm, into the storm. Into the storm, into the storm, into the storm, into the storm.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Into the Storm podcast. My name is Ken Yance. I'm the founder of the podcast. I'm also the founder of the Bison Tribe. Over here on the boards, we got our man Brandon. What's up, Brandon? Give me a peace sign, brother. Okay, he's paying attention. And then today on our episode, we have Joel McCreight.
Got it right.
We just had to start it over because I said it wrong the first time. So, so here we are, man. It's Into the Storm, baby. But Joel, if you just listen to our intro music, that was Joel knocking that out the park for us. And so he actually has a full length version that I can't fit in there because y'all would just listen to his music and then tune out and not listen to the actual podcast. But yeah, he made a killer song, dude, man. I appreciate that.
That was fun.
Yeah, and I got lucky because you said you've had that kind of built out a little bit. You just had to throw some lyrics on it.
Yeah, I sat on that for a couple of years. I was like, I couldn't come up with lyrics. And then you told me about the Bison Tribe and what you're trying to do, and it inspired the lyrics for that. So it was awesome.
Amazing how fast that came together. So you guys can see on the ticker down there, Joel goes by the Taco King. How I know Joel is I'm a huge fan of live music, and here in the upstate of South Carolina, we have some tremendous bands. And it seems like Joel is a part of about half of them,
or record them at least.
So he's out there, man, and just extremely talented, and just a fun guy to be around. And so, and you can see there his nickname is the Taco King, and there's a little story about that. We'll get into that. But I see your social media, but I don't even hear from you until like Monday afternoon. That's when you start pre-gaming for Taco Tuesday. And then all day Taco Tuesday, man. It's like, all right, Joel's active, baby. he is active.
So true.
So yeah, man. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Joel.
Well, 53. I like long walks on the beach. No, man. Where do I start? I mean,
let's start. So you're from the upstate, or where are you from?
I am. I'm a Greenville native. I'm one of those, and I was born in like the Greenville Hospital or whatever, and only time I moved away, I was around when I was 23 years old. I moved to Tennessee and lived there for a few years, and then moved back in 1999, and I've been back ever since.
Okay. So was that far enough back? Because I'm originally from Charleston, so I moved up here in '95. But I know at some point there were only like 3 high schools, like Sterling, Greenville, and Parker, right?
Well, there was Eastside.
Was you that far back?
I go back pretty far, but
if you're 53, we're the same age. I just didn't know how far back.
Yeah, we are the same age, aren't we?
Yeah,
like that's what, a month apart, a couple months apart.
Yeah, December. I'm a Sagittarius.
August. Yeah, I'm 3 months your elder. Right, so. Thank you.
Right.
No, we got that straightened out. This whole podcast is taking a different vibe. I'm just kidding. I graduated from Eastside High School. Okay. All right, and Eastside's been around since maybe the 60s, late 60s or something, early 70s. I'm not sure, actually, the history, but I grew up in Woodruff, though. So I went to even Woodruff High. It wasn't until my senior year.
Was Varner there?
Yes.
Okay, legend, man.
He was a legend, and I witnessed all that whole time, And, but I always wanted to move to Greenville. it's something I kind
Oh,
of
we're Mount Pilot, baby. We're Mount Pilot of Mayberry.
you know,
You were
I
out there in
I got-
Mayberry.
yeah, right. Well, like we didn't even live in Woodruff town. We lived 9 miles out in the country, and literally we were a mile away from the Greenville line. We were in Spartanburg County. We were 9 miles from Woodruff, and like not far from the Greer line. You know, so we were like this big plot of 28 acres, and
Right.
half of it was woods, and the other half was fields, and it was awesome. Yeah.
So, what was your favorite moonshine that y'all made?
We didn't do any of the moonshine.
Oh, man.
My parent, my father was particularly strict. He was a minister, so yeah,
gotcha.
we'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's in Tennessee. That's when you went and got them recipes.
At least I don't know when he was drinking them.
I got
But no, hey, I went for a walk in those woods, you know, and they would be like old cars from the 30s or 40s,
Right.
like rusted cars. And I found a steel contraption there in the woods.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
That
Yeah,
was
with
in
the old.
Woodruff or Tennessee?
This was in Woodruff.
In
Yeah,
Woodruff.
Yeah, yeah.
Makes sense.
There was a steel. I was like, "What is that, Dad?" You know, like, might have been good. This podcast is bringing something down. I'm kidding.
That's awesome, man. So, tell me about your childhood, man. How was it growing up in Woodruff? And
Yeah.
when did you move to Greenville?
So I was born in Greenville. I lived right off of Brusher Creek. You know, when I was about 3 or 4 years old, my father built a house in the middle of nowhere out in the country, and all there was this really old church, like kind of nearby, and across was this radio controlled airplane field, which was cool. You know, like I thought, man, this is awesome. But I moved there when I was like 3, 4, and so grew up in the country for all, you know, until I was like 17, and then it was around then that I moved to Greenville.
Got
And
around some
I wish
girls.
to.
You got around some girls finally, man.
Yeah. Oh, it was country living, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
like I worked at peach sheds and things like that,
yeah.
you know, during the summer times or.
How'd you
know,
entertain yourself, man? Like,
Yeah.
I moved around a lot, and there's a few times we got kind of on the outskirts, man. We were like catching cow ants and wasps and putting them in jars and shaking them up to piss everybody off and see who would win. We were doing stupid stuff, man.
Well, I'm just trying to remember, but I would go on these long walks and journeys into the woods. We had 14 acres of woods and 14 acres of fields, and the only images that come when you ask that question is we would make these really large, giant gardens, you know. And I remember when I was a kid, I would go running down those freshly tilled, you know,
Okay.
gardens, kicking up dust. So I was like the road runner or something. Man, it like cracked all my toenails. It was rough, man. I would do it barefooted.
Right.
So there's like that memory, you know. But
Man, I'm gonna tell you a story, and I don't even know it. If I had a borderline story, what would be your vote? Let's do it like old
Okay.
school, like up or down. Would you tell the story on the podcast? If it was just borderline, like Peter might get caught.
beat him up, get called.
Yeah, but there's a statute of limitations.
This-
Sure. So let's do it, man. So, first of all, people eat frogs. So they're food. Right.
Mhm.
And I don't know, as reptiles, I don't know if you got a lot of pets, so I don't really know how people can feel about this. But as small children, like again, statute of limitations, we had a lot of frogs at one time, and we were bored. Okay. Poor kids in the country, you're bored, you figure it out. So we would play what we call frog baseball. So we caught a bunch of frogs
Terrible.
and put them in a big bucket, and then it was just soft toss, man, and just
Oh man.
go for it. So that's country living right there, brother.
Yeah. You could have donated them to school for, you know, when they dissect
That's
them
what I'm
and
saying.
stuff
They
like that,
dissected them, man. It's like,
you know.
I mean, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
It wasn't really bad when you catch them flush, but it's when you foul tip them.
No.
That's when it gets. They make that sound. But
Gosh, man.
My bad.
Never did that.
No, I'm glad you did.
I
Man.
lived a
Like,
little
I
less,
had to- I had to live
little
the
less
night-
aggressive.
live the nightmares, brother. But anyway, so what's your favorite childhood story? I know you were running down the making dust fly, so you was obviously a quick little kid.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that probably like that. There wasn't a lot to do. We didn't have the
Right.
internet. We didn't have a lot of stuff. I mean, like, and I never got all the toys, like, you know,
Right.
like the Atari. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I would get them later or whatever, but you know, it wasn't much to do.
Right.
That radio controlled airplane field, I could just go and walk. They'd be like, hey, go on that airfield, across the road, whatever, you know, it's
Yeah.
a big field. They would fly some rather large radio controlled planes.
That's pretty cool.
Really got into it. It wasn't much else to do.
And that was back in the day because we ain't young.
No.
So that was kind of like the Wright brothers just trying to figure it out. So there's a good chance some of those might not have landed.
See, yeah. Oh, and I'd have dreams about that. Like, seriously, I would have dreams like they would crash and I'd go find them and then I'd hide the plane and they would come looking for it. I forgot all about that.
Yeah.
But I did. It would affect me because there were a few that crashed, like, maybe on our property or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'd go hunting for them and, but I would always have that dream that one would crash and I'd go find it and I'd hide the parts.
I didn't play that whole thing in my head because I was a Steve Austin fan.
Yeah.
Like as a kid, I was like the Bionic Man.
Oh, I loved it.
And he crashed the plane is how it happened. So like I say while they're flying these planes, they put a little Steve Austin. Yeah, she's breaking up.
She's breaking up, baby.
And then you run over like Oscar Goldman. You're like, let's put him back together. Like
that's funny. Well, you know what? I'm pretty sure, Ken, that one of those many times I ran and kicked up the dust in the garden, I was going,
yes, sir.
Yeah.
I got a cousin, female cousin. She's the only cousin I have that's older than me by a few months.
Yeah.
And we would trade out. So I wanted to play Steve Austin. She would be the Bionic Woman. And so we would do that, but then we had to play like husband and wife get married. Like we would just have to pretend like I'm getting married. I was like, dude, that's a terrible trade-off, but and I had to do it, for the Steve Austin, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can never remember which arm was bionic because both arms wasn't bionic. And she'd call me out like, you can't throw it that far with that arm. Like,
at least you didn't have one of those friends that tried to make you be the Wonder Woman next. Just like, it's your turn to be Wonder Woman.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's when you went to Tennessee.
Everything's like,
You went to Tennessee right there.
I've had an identity problem since then, but
I got you, man.
might need to cut that part out. Sorry.
So tell me about your family, man. Like growing up, you had siblings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have a much older sister who's 16 years older than I, and she got married at 19. I was like 3-4 years old. Oh man, I was sad because she was like a second mama. A second mom to me. Changed my diapers, rocked me to sleep, whatever. And I was so
At
sad.
3? Bro,
Yeah, 3 or
you
4.
was a late.
I meant like as a
got you.
baby.
I got you.
She got married when I was like 3 years old, and it broke my heart, man. I loved her, and it, probably okay. Here it goes. I'm kidding. No, it really did, though.
Sure.
And then her husband joined the military, so then she moved away, and so they would go to like Okinawa, Alaska, or be stationed in a lot of different places. So I didn't get to see her much all through my childhood. So I'd miss her. She was a lot older. She's like 16 years older than I. And fortunately, these days she lives 45 minutes away from here. So, but then I had an older brother who's 2 years older than I. So that was my siblings. I was the youngest. I was the baby.
What a good thing about her being close again is when you get ready to go back in the diapers and maybe she'll
Right.
she knows how to handle it.
Right. In fact, she checked me up.
So so as an adult, man, how'd family life form up? Got married, kids?
Yeah. So so one thing that was, I guess, a little unusual with right after we moved to Greenville and I went to Eastside High School, for a year, and then I went on to college. My father passed away when I was 18, and right after I started college, and so that, and he was a very strict religious man because he was a minister of a non-denominational, very small church, and it's kind of a church that I would say went a little against the grain of some orthodoxy. You know what I mean?
That's where the moonshine came in?
Yeah, right. We would drink moonshine for the communion, and eat tacos. That's where it all started. No. Okay, no, but no. The thing with my father is, he loved us. He took care of us, and he was a really great man, very spiritual. But it's really weird when your father is a minister and it's really super strict and really holy or whatever.
Right,
You know what I mean? You start going, God, Father. I don't know how to say this, but there's this quote, right? That I've heard people say, perhaps my mom even said it, I think, you can be so heavily minded that you're no earthly good, you know? So I feel like, although I know my father loved us and he was a good man, right? And a very, very, very spiritual man, but, like I never got hugs from him, right? There was this, his mind was always, it was well read. I mean, talk about reading books. I mean,
Yeah.
they were stacked up, and the guy knew so much stuff, and very interesting. But so there's that, right? So but anyway, but I'll say when you lose a parent like that, and particularly for a guy to lose your father at 18, I will say that although we didn't get into it all the time or whatever, we didn't have the best relationship, and I debated with him a lot, as I got older, smarter, like any teen, right?
Right.
But, when it came to stuff like biblical things or whatever, I would sometimes play the devil's advocate and I would
Right.
challenge him on some things, some of his beliefs and things like that. So we would debate and things. But, I,
No, well, let me
Circle
ask this:
with yeah.
was your mom kind of like the counter to that? Did
She was,
kind of balance it out.
very different, just kind of laid back and nurturing, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean. So she kind of was that, where he kind of wasn't. But I would say like losing your right right before he passed away, he really kind of started changing a bit. It's kind of weird. I don't know if sometimes like God or whatever
Right.
prepares someone, right? He definitely kind of started changing, and with me moving out and going to college, right? It was easier for me to, when I tried to reconnect, and I started to communicate a lot better with him, right? And we were just beginning. I was like, I'm really gonna, be able to be more friends with him, right?
Right.
And like, grow with him. That only lasted a few months.
Let me
you know?
ask you this, because I mean, I went through something similar with my biological mother.
Mhm.
She was gone out of my life when before I was 2 years old, and so me and my only full blooded brother we got split. So he went with her and I went with my dad, and was actually with my grandmother for a few years, but we had reconnected when I was an adult, and we had just started kind of having some more intentional conversations. You know what I mean? We kind of met up when I was an older teen. I just wasn't mature enough. I wasn't ready for how to try to figure out from my end how to mend that, right? So it was just easier to just like be the lone wolf I always felt like I was, and just
Yeah.
disconnect. But then what's crazy is we had just started to kind of connect more, and that's when she passed away. It's like, and I kind of hear that like where you're just
Yeah.
starting to hit this maturity level where you're
Yeah.
okay now, and then he's starting to come back a little bit from way over in left field somewhere,
Right.
whatever it is, and you're kind of starting to meet, and that's kind of what I
Yeah.
went through. And then
Same thing.
it's like then you lose them, and it's like,
Yeah.
man, what could have been? You know what I mean? Like, so
That's
I can
interesting.
definitely relate to that.
Yeah, and I'm just remembering some things. I guess this conversation is just flowing, right?
Yeah.
So, when I was about right after we moved to Woodruff in the country and built the house, I was probably around 6 years old. He had a massive heart attack. I mean, massive. And it happened while he was at church, and I witnessed all of it, right? And they carried him home, and then eventually he had to go to the hospital and all this stuff, and it scared me, right? I didn't know what was going on. And I remember going in a room, just kind of standing in the corner. And then finally, like my aunt or something saw me and realized that I probably needed, to be talked to or
Right.
whatever, you know what I mean? And I was just like, because I was upset. I didn't know, what was happening, because he was alive, but I saw he was just not,
Right.
Anyway, but I'll say, I worried about that all my childhood. I lived with that, right? Because he was a minister in his schedule and my mom worked, he was the one that picked me up from school a lot, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And there were times when I'd be waiting at school and it was late, and I'm like, I'd worry. I'd be like,
Right.
and he was older, right? I mean, he wasn't like super old, but he
Mhm.
was older than most of my friends'
Right.
fathers,
Right.
at the time. So, but Anyway, but I lived with that. So all of my life of leading up to the 18, I always knew or thought that because of what happened to him. But he lived several years after that, 12 years after that massive heart attack, or maybe I might be doing my math wrong, but it was several years later.
Right.
But one thing is my dad would make these statements, or he would say things, as a spiritual man, like as he's preaching, right? Some would say prophetic or whatever,
Right.
like, but he would say, I can tell you this, God didn't take me with this heart attack. He would say, and he told me that I would watch my children grow up, right? That he would see them become adults.
Okay.
And literally 3 months after I turned 18, like, he dies, right? And I'm like, wow. So there was a lot of little things he said that later on in life kind of come back to haunt me in a way, that affected like my journey in life. I'm like, he said that, and like, that did happen, or things like that, right? So I think that's interesting.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Unusual.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, I'm not buried in up to my eyeballs in my faith, but I definitely am a man of faith. I do believe in a higher power. I do believe in Christ, actually, and so I don't try to preach it to everyone else, but and there's so many things that's happened in my life where I don't have another explanation. Like, I don't have another explanation other than
It's wild.
then that's what it is. So
This life is wild.
but what's crazy is, like, I remember probably the craziest thing for me was this little church van would come around and scoop us up. And man, I lived in the hood, so I was like, yeah, I'll go for a ride. Man, y'all got cookies. What y'all like? What are y'all gonna give me? So I went out there, and I remember, I'll never forget this, because I was probably like 7 years old.
Yeah.
And at that time, my family hadn't been to church or anything. But we go up there, and we just sit in the big. A lot of times when you go to church or something, like, they got the youth side. So we're in the big part of the church, and they've got this big easel up there with this big heart, and it's Velcro. And then it's got all these little black dots. They come around, and you grab a handful of dots out, and you go up there and say, okay, you go up there, and these are lies and all the different, they list all the sins, and you go up there and you stick them all over the heart. And then this guy comes out, he's dressed like Jesus, man. He just comes out, he's got this like little scraper thing, and he just scrapes them all off, and all the sins fell off, and like, there's your heart. So, like, I just remember that sticking, like, just the visual of that as a like 7-year-old kid, or however old I was. Like, man, that's pretty cool. But anyway, moving on. So your mom and everybody, like, your mom's still alive?
She is. A lot of challenges around her right now with her health. She's fallen several times, and recently had a stroke. And but we're, it's nearly miraculous how well she's recovered, and she's doing good. She's needing some assistance and stuff, but she's 85 years old now. And so yeah, I mean, but that's been my most recent storm that I've had to head straight into, and not by choice, but it's like, she took care of me all of my life. She's a great woman, man. Everyone loves her. She's just, it still is, and but my brother's done a lot. Him and his wife, and his wife's a nurse practitioner, and my sister as well. We've to spend a lot of extra time and many hours at the hospital with her and stuff like that over the last few months, but
So changing gears, man, let's talk about what you do, man. Like, I'm sitting here looking at these notes. I'm like, dang, you're the IT executive recruiter, search consultants at Find Great People.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Here I am.
Yeah. I got Find Great People hat on
right here in front of you, bro.
I'm not cool as, I don't have a bison hat yet.
We're working on that.
Hey, we're working on this.
Working on some apparel deals. You're also, how I know you, is music producer, engineer at Golden Strip School of Music and Studio, singer, songwriter, and guitarist for Evan's Dilemma. That's right. That's your band.
That's right.
Right. And Evan does not exist.
Well, he exists. He's a friend of the drummer and I. Okay. Actually, we're like one of the oldest bands in Greenville.
Really?
We formed in 1990. The drummer and I were in a different band called The Promise before that, and we would hang out with this guy who's a great dear friend of ours. His name is Evan. People ask me this, by the way, all the time. I have to tell this story.
Right.
Who is Evan? Or they call me Evan or whatever. And, anyway, he would hang out with us, but every week we'd be hanging out, and have some major life choice or some kind of a storm, but it was a different storm and every week. Right. And he's like, should I move to Rwanda and save the children? Or it was like these grandiose things, like not like little small, like,
right.
And then my drummer friend, Kevin, he still plays with me in Evan's Dilemma, man, all these years later. This is like 1990 when we formed, and we've been friends since 85, by the way.
So hold on, Evan was never in the band?
He was never in the band. We jammed with him a few times under the moniker of a different band, but no, was never really in Evan's Dilemma.
Y'all couldn't give him like a tambourine, just take the jingle things out and let him just hit it?
Timing was terrible. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Actually, keyboard player.
Okay.
We did start a band, but it was like things evolved, lives changed.
Rwanda was calling.
Yeah.
Rwanda was calling.
For a few months, he did jam with us in the band, but this was like 86, 87 or something. So this is 3 years later. But my drummer and I, Kevin Hoyer, my best friend, best buddies since the 80s, we need to start talking about this stuff, man. We just roll our eyes every time. We'd be like, oh God.
Another dilemma.
Another Evan's Dilemma. We would say that every time. We're like, another Evan's Dilemma. Or we're on the phone talking about it. I'm like, oh my God, another Evan's Dilemma. And then we were in this other band. We're like, hey, if we ever start another band, we should call it Evan's Dilemma.
For sure.
And then like, we never realized it, but like a year later or something, sure enough, we like need to start a band. We made a list of 100 names and we could never get past Evan's Dilemma. It's like, you know.
So what does Evan get out of this, man? Does he get
absolutely nothing?
He's
a legend, you know. he's getting promoted all the time, and he's never even put in the work for the band.
Good stuff, man. Nah. So, and then you're also keyboardist, vocalist for Eric Weiler's band.
Yeah. So, in fact, we were in the studio this past weekend. He's been working on an album, and I've been actually. It's like we're 2 years in now. I think I'm pretty sure. That's how I started. I've been friends with him for years, but we kind of got a little closer. And he's like, "Hey," he had heard some of the stuff I produced. He's like, "Hey, you mind working with me?" And we started working on a song or two. And man, now we've put so much time into it. We got about 6 to 8 songs in the hopper, and got 4, 5, 6 more that we're probably going to do. And there's going to be some EPs and singles coming out later this year. Nice. And they sound great.
Yeah.
Eric's a really great songwriter. I mean, and and I work with him or whatever, and it's been a real joy I even played a little guitar on it some too, but mostly keyboards and producing and coaching him on his vocals and his guitaring and just the whole thing, right? Record the drums.
Well, you play a lot of how many instruments do you play?
I mean, just the basic 4 core, guitar, keyboards, bass, and drums. Okay. When I started, I was in church and this is where it all started, right? I'm 9 years old and my dad teaches me how to play bass, a little bit. And then I was like, man. And right at the same time, I started taking piano lessons. Okay. Right. And I did that for 2 or 3 years. And by the way, that was one of the other ways as a child, I would lock myself in a room and I'd play piano for 4, 5, 6 hours. There was nothing to do. But I loved it. It was such a release for me. And it's a way of escape for me, as a kid, but then I was like, I really want to play the drums because I started getting into more aggressive music or whatever a little bit. And then I got the drums. So I started playing that. But then I was like, but the guitar was like, it has more strings and it's a little bit more complicated. I don't know why. The other instruments were easy, but the guitar seemed daunting. But when I was 13, I learned the guitar. So those the main 4 instruments. I was trying other stuff, but that's mainly it.
Well, man, you're extremely talented, brother. Like every time, I've come and seen you and you're playing a different instrument. And when you got up there one night, you were lead singing. I was like, dude, I just knew you from keyboards at that point.
Right.
I was like,
that's right. You saw me from the Eric Weiler.
Yeah, mostly with Eric's stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so, then I saw you kind of doing different things. I was like, man.
But I've been doing this. Eric was in middle school and I was performing live.
Okay.
I probably dude, I did my first professional music tour when I was still a senior in high school. Mm-hmm. Like during my Christmas break, senior high school, I'm traveling multi-states in a bus and opening up for a band and playing in like these fairly sizable venues. That's we don't have the time to go into how.
Hold on.
There's love. Oh, yeah.
What kind of music were you playing?
That was a Christian rock band.
Okay, I was gonna say, man,
but it's
Pops
all
ain't-
like
Pops ain't having that.
you're in the right. No, he was cool. He became cool with it. Like, yeah, I couldn't listen to regular music. Like, you know what I'm saying?
What were you sleeping and listening to, bro?
Oh,
were you
yeah.
Iron Maiden? Like, what were you?
Probably the first
Ozzy?
Van Halen, man. Probably my first slip off to listen was probably when I was 14. I remember listening to some Van Halen, like that 1984 album first came out, and then I started listening to other stuff. That was about when I really kind of started listening to more regular stuff. But I wound up listening to a lot of Christian rock because I found an alternative because it was, and he was like, but then he was kind of okay with it, because, and I was like, so it was weird, but I learned all this about Christian rock, but it's amazing because I wanted to be a musician. I told my parents at 11, I'm like, I remember, never will forget this. I'm riding in a car and I'm in the back seat and I'm like, and I slid up to the front. I was like, I'm going to be a musician. I told them this at 11. And then they're like, oh, whatever. You can't make a living doing it. That whole classic legendary thing,
Right.
I was like, no, I'm going to, but at the time I wanted to be a classical pianist. That's why I wasn't listening to any kind of rock stuff or whatever. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that I discovered like Christian rock music or whatever.
Right.
And I was like, hey, this stuff's cool. Then like I say, I started listening to a lot of other stuff, but
Well, man, I got a quote here. It says that success in the music industry isn't something that you wait for or hope for. It is something that you create day after day. That's Simon Tam.
that applies to everything in life. It's not just music, but it applies to music because sometimes in music, musicians can be dreamers. They're like, ooh, I just want to, play guitar, whatever it is, sing, but it's a lot of work, and it's always been a lot of work, and you have to put, it's different these days though, but that rings even more true today. I don't know how old that quote is, but it rings even more true today. You can't put out an album once every 2 years, once a year, once every couple of years, and that's it. Maybe shoot a couple of music videos. These days, you have to be putting out content of all sorts, behind the scenes. You have to be releasing songs on a regular basis, singles, doing all kind of stuff, constantly working in doing shows and things like that, as a musician, you have to be working for it every day,
for sure.
to make it a reality. But that applies to anything, man.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, tell me about your kids. I mean, you got 2 boys.
I have 2 boys and a daughter and a stepdaughter. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Good deal. Now, are they into music?
So the girls aren't, and not at all. And I have 2 grandkids.
Okay.
So my daughter, Sydney, who's 28, she has 2 kids, and I have a little girl and little boy, and they're like 5 to 7 year ranges, and love them to death. That changes you too, man.
Yeah,
Having grandkids, and I know I look really great to be a grandpa. Let's just be honest. But no, but my 23-year-old son Matthew, he started playing. I started teaching him when he was like 13, 14. He mostly learned on his own. I'd show him a few things. Same way with my youngest son. But Matthew started playing in our band. Like we played a few little acoustic things together a couple times when he was like maybe 15. And then by the time he was late 15, turning 16, he was in my band, Evan's Dilemma. Like we needed a bass player, and he played like a party, like a last minute, and he nailed it, man. He did so good. I'm like,
I was out somewhere where Eric got caught up somewhere else.
Yeah.
And he came in and stepped in
yeah,
and was
he's so talented.
going off. Man.
He does way more than bass now. So but he was like me. He started with bass. Remember, that's how I started. But he played at Evan's Dilemma for years. So here's a kid. We're playing clubs, and Kevin is a pro. He toured all over Europe. I toured, I don't know. Some people maybe not know that, but like I was on major tours. I rode buses. I lived in Nashville. These were big tours, arena tours. You know what I'm saying? Thousands of people and festivals, 40, 50,000. Like I played a lot of big shows, and even, somehow we got to go to the Grammys. We didn't win, but we got for one album that I helped write and all this stuff like that. So there's some, some good stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
I lost my thought. What was I talking about? Oh gosh. Oh, I know. I was talking about Matthew. I don't even know what
he
to
was.
connect the dots.
Yeah, I don't know where you were going with it, but we were talking about your kids and
This is the part of the podcast where you edited.
now, let me ask you this. Let me change up a little bit. So, knowing, the way you and your dad's relationship was coming up and how that, his profession, his calling kind of affected y'all's relationship in a lot of ways. How would you say, as a father, like, how did that affect the way that you father your children?
That's a great question. I think musicians are the people that your mama warned the girls to not bring home. They have a terrible relation. I mean, a terrible reputation, I should say. But I mean, it's not too bad. I mean, like, look, when I had a wife and kid and I was on tour, I was gone for months at a time and all that, I was like, this ain't gonna work, Right. That's why I got into IT, became a recruiter. And well, I was more technical back then. Okay. Then I kind of phased into being a recruiter for IT stuff, but went back to school and I'm like, hey man, I should not be. I remember being on a bus. I was like 28 years old, 29 years old. And I was like one of the older guys on the bus besides the bus driver in this band. And we were on this big tour with a band called DC Talk. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they were like a big Christian rock band in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. And I was like riding and I was like, I'm in Oregon and, I'm on a bus and I'm just looking at, fields and fields, probably saw some bison. And I was like, I need to do something different, and for musicians, right? How many killed themselves after 27? I mean, that whole thing, right? Yeah. Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, Jim Morrison. I mean, like Keith Moon. I mean, like all there were 27. So when you get past 27, something happens when you're like 28. And look, if you're making a good living and, you make all these hits, like I made a living at doing music, but I did not get rich.
Yeah, but they got rich and it still had the same amount.
True.
It might have been better to not be as rich.
True.
Like, just don't be
like
real
somewhere
good.
in the middle.
Yeah.
Like I'm talking about that's where you're making real good living. You're not maybe rich, rich, where you don't have to do anything the rest of your life. You've got millions in the bank. I don't mean that kind of.
Imagine this. I thought about this about Kurt Cobain because like I loved his music.
Same.
But I think like, okay, let's take Prince.
Okay.
And take Prince at 27 years old.
Okay.
And cut it off. How much music did that man produce? And not only that, how many things did he write that he just gave away? Like Sinead O'Connor and like, I don't know how, I remember.
Well, he got paid pretty good for that.
Oh, I know. I'm just
royalties
saying, like,
at least, right?
Right. But a lot of people don't know that, like, certain songs. I mean, it had the vibe of him, like Sheila E. and stuff like that.
That's right.
Like you could tell that's Prince had something to do with that. But what I'm saying is, like, imagine at 28 we didn't get any more of that. Like, imagine what Kurt Cobain had in him, bro.
Oh, that really broke my heart when he killed himself, and that I was really into. So that was real time. A lot of the other ones happened before. I was really
like Morrison.
And I mean, I wasn't aware or not really necessarily a fan at the time because I couldn't even listen to music. It wasn't until later that I was a late blooming fan, but no, that really, because I'll tell you this, I was doing alternative rock music, like Kevin and I was, Evan's Dilemma. That's the kind of music we did, sort of. I mean, I wouldn't say we sounded exactly like, but we were doing like punkish kind of grungish kind of stuff that was not like the radio, and everything on the radio was just not too great. We weren't doing the hair band thing, none of that stuff, right? We were like punk rockers, sort of, alternative, whatever. We were into all kind of stuff, but we were also into like The Cure and U2. I grew up listening to U2. I love them, and all this stuff, but mix that with some punk. So we were out there playing and making these really loud, and we'd be into these artists that weren't that popular. And then when Nirvana broke with Smells Like Teen Spirit, I'm like, dude, I mean, that sounds like something we would do. In fact, I have a song that I recorded 3 years before that as a similar chord progression. Similar. Wow. Not, you wouldn't say, oh, that sounds, but if I broke it down for you and be like, yeah, Right. But like, so I'm like, hey, we're legit. When that came on, like, and then the grunge movement happened, I was like, we felt so legit,
Right.
like we were at the right time, like
That's
doing what we
awesome.
did because we were doing it before it became popular,
Yeah.
you know? So, anyway, I got off on a tangent.
So what percentage of your time, like in what you're doing now
Yeah.
with music, just sticking in that lane?
Sure.
I know you're producing music for other
Yeah.
people, like helping with guys like Eric, going out there and
Mm-hmm.
playing in other bands. Like, what percentage of your time now is creating your own stuff?
Not a lot, Ken, and that's the challenge, you know. And I'll say one of my challenges in that area is this: I'm very, very busy. You know, it actually affects my. I mean, I have some dedicated times with my kids and some things like that, right, and family. But it's these small windows where I'm religious about. Every Wednesday, I'm with my youngest son. We're gonna do dinner. We do our thing, you know. That's
Tuesdays,
me and you.
with the tacos.
Yeah. You know, Sundays it's sushi Sunday with,
Right.
with my other son and whatever. But but a typical week for me looks like this. I mean, like 8 to 5, I'm doing IT recruiting and I'm talking to clients and talking to candidates and placing like CIOs, chief information officers, and chief security officers, whatever, like, and IT directors, whatever, different leadership level type, you know, IT folks. And then in the evenings, I'm, you know, Monday evenings, Tuesday evenings a lot when I'm not eating tacos with somebody. Thursday evenings, weekends, you know, Sunday evenings are pretty popular. I'm recording artists, you know, like Eric, like Randomonium. You know, a lot of people see them. Like in fact, I've got them in the studio on Saturday, and I've worked with them on 5 or 6 songs already, and we're just kind of pressing on. And you know,
Rando's unbelievable.
they're great, good friends of mine. I love them to death, man. They're awesome. But there's that, and then I might be playing a show on Friday night and Saturday night. You know, you know, so I'm just like, there's not a lot of time, and it really affects like relationships. You know, like when it comes to like social, you know, I have very limited time, and then if I'm engaged in a relationship, you know, with someone, I mean, they have to understand this is just, I'm kind of riding that wave, and I'm like, what do I do? You know, there's not a lot of time for personal development other than, you know, from 11 to 12 at midnight, you know, like I spend that hour kind of, you know, whatever, reading or.
Well, that takes me to this quote by John Green. It says, some people have lives, some people have music.
I think we just covered that, you know, like it comes to life, you know, and then like, you know, and then like we wind up buying gear and like we could become obsessed with sounds and the things that make sounds, and you know, it's wild. I'm just telling you, it's a wild. Like Eric's probably got, oh man, I don't know, 30, 40 guitars. Some of them are extremely valuable vintage, you know. I'm not as bad as him. So I mean, talking trash about him on this podcast helps me feel better about myself. But I have invested thousands and thousands, and like I've got probably 15 guitars. I don't need, you know.
Wow.
I got all the studio gear, microphones.
Well, when you went to Tennessee, did you learn to play spoons? Because I know that's a big thing. You're like they beat them on the thigh.
Before I moved to Nashville, we did move to Knoxville first. I'll tell you why. Evan's Dilemma. We were like, we had contacts and some connections in Nashville, and then we're like, hey, that's 2 to 3 hours from Knoxville. And Knoxville's 2 to 3 hours from home because we had a base here, right? And I'm like, so we could go back home. We can go to Nashville, and that's a university town, you know. And back then, Greenville was diddly. And Knoxville was way better city than Greenville. I don't know that that's true anymore. I like it. We're probably on par, you know, with Knoxville, or maybe even greater than Knoxville. You know, because the year I moved, BMW came in and changed really the face of this whole place. I remember they moved in like 92, 93. Right. And it was just beginning to change when I moved, but
they've done a lot.
Yeah.
And Knoxville, I've been there a few times. It just seems dirty. Like it just, I don't know. I don't know.
It was great in the early 90s, man. You know, like we went out there and there was way more venues for the band to play. And then like in the university, we'd have younger people coming out. Where the music scene, I mean, heck, we were the early pioneers here in the original music rock scene in Greenville. You know what I mean? Like we were doing in the 80s here. And, but anyway, of course, my dad was doing that stuff, and his brother back in the 40s and 50s, you know.
Well, you touched a little bit. You said not a lot of time for personal development. And we've spoke earlier, and you're not really huge into books, but one of the things that we do, the Bison Tribe, is the end is never stop growing. So we have
Yeah.
our core values, and that's a big piece of what we do. So we read "Can't Hurt Me" by David Goggins last month.
Oh,
Great book. And then we had a meeting. We have 2 meetings a month. So last night we had about a 3-hour meeting, and part of that was we were reviewing the book and what everybody got from it. It's just really cool to hear what different guys took from the book. So one of the things we like to try to do on the pod is just find something that you've used. I know you spoke about TED Talks, and there's a couple of books you said you might mention 1 or 2 of them, and just like to kind of see what you've kind of tapped into.
Well, I reckon I read the Bible, and I was kidding. No, I'll say I read a lot more back then than when that personal journey when my father passed away and I started playing music. I had a lot of time on my hands. I literally worked 3 hours a day. We would show up and do a sound check and do a show for a couple hours, 3 hours, but during the day I'd ride around and read a lot of books. I had to figure out what I believed because my father was very narrowly focused on some beliefs, and I was like, surely God is of the universe. If there's a God, he's much bigger than these small, narrow things, and set me on a path. And I wound up reading not just the Bible, but I read like the Book of Mormon. I read some of the Quran, like Buddha's teachings, and a lot of books about that stuff and some wild stuff. But, these days I don't have a lot of time. I mean, the last book I read was from a lady that I met at a TED Talk. I also have participated in TEDs, not as a speaker, but I've done music. I've created some TED music art and stuff like that for TED, and I've been a volunteer and stuff like that for some TED Talks. Nice. And I met an author that come out with a book that's about real talk, with their family. And that was really good. But I watch a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of stuff. It's like nowadays, we need to fix the kitchen sink. You go to YouTube and you use that. But I apply that to not just fixing kitchen sinks. I apply that to my life. Right. So I will look up, go and look up people's opinions about this aspect of your life for development. But I do have some core like podcasts and things and that I kind of watch.
And I watch Patrick Bet-David a lot. Yeah, that's my guy. Chris Williamson's got a phenomenal podcast, man. That guy. I just love the way they interview. The way the conversations flow, man. I look at it like I've just always been in different phases of my life. Like I coached, I played sports, I coached sports. I went on this big personal development journey. I'm just always like taking on something new. I always have to have something new. And now it's like that interview. Like I really study the way people interview and keep conversations like flowing. And some of you kind of see them bogged down and stuff. And I kind of break it down like film, so I really like watching podcasts just to see how people do that stuff. But
I would say the one book that kind of affected me, my thought process a good bit, was the book The Secret, which I know a lot of people's read that, or and this was probably 15 years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago. But it kind of changed my mindset about maybe a lot of your viewers and maybe a good bit about it, but it's about when you really believe in something and you put intent behind it, things in the universe just start unfolding and those things begin to happen. And what I found is interesting in that, and there's a science, you can get into the science of it. Like
we just did last night,
the nanoparticles, and it's very fascinating to get to dig deep into how it is an amazing universe. But here's the problem I had with The Secret. Like they celebrate and talk about this awesome tool. It's a framework for how life works, which is awesome. And I'm so glad that they brought that attention, And then I went back and started thinking about all the things I read in the religious readings and in other books and things like that. Well, that whole book is about that. It's about, this has been known for thousands of years, right? But the focus of the book is about the universe and about the platform. The platform is the mechanism in which those things happen when you believe. And I'm like, man, you can You can call it whatever you want to, but this was talked about in the Bible the entire time. And if you read it right, it's about faith and believing, even when evidence is not seen, and those things coming to pass. That's what the whole Bible is about. All things are possible through Christ who strengthens me. Right. And I started to sound like a preacher here. It's just kind of weird. But do you understand? They didn't give the cred to the creator of the Matrix. They just talk about the Matrix and how it works. Right. This is my problem with this the whole secret. But for what it is wonderful. Right. They just don't go one level deeper. And I believe there's an architect.
That's right.
An architect that put this environment in place to where when you have faith, not just faith, but actions. Right. It's just even the scripture in the Bible that says faith without works is dead, right? Is death or whatever. It means it doesn't work. It's a two-part thing. You have to believe in something. And if you believe in something so much, then you take action and then you put intent behind that action. And it never fails. Like what you wish for, what happens, it comes around. It's the craziest thing, you know? I mean, I've witnessed this happen. I mean, like I slid up in that car and I said, I'm going to be a musician. Right. Do you know the chances back then of being a successful musician? I want to ride a bus. I want to make albums, make CDs, records. I want to get paid royalties. I want to write songs in the studio. I want to record them. I want to play in front of thousands of people. I am so sad, Ken, that I didn't put and make it rich. I was so not interested and cared about monetary things. I really didn't. It's just not for me. It wasn't the money at all. It was about the joy of that. Well, all those things, I made money. I made a living, but I never made it super rich, right? But for a guy in his 20s or whatever, I mean, to be making a full-time living, having a kid, I even had a kid and wife. She didn't even have to work at some point. I'm supporting him based on the money I was making. So I was still doing pretty good for a young guy, right? And doing what I love. But man, if I was ever in between gigs or something, I would go to an unemployment office. Like, what do? I play guitar for a band, and I make so much, and
I
like
eat tacos.
Anyway, I didn't mean to get off on all that. But
No, man,
I'm kind of
that's
on
good
tangents
stuff.
here.
No, bro, that's what it's about.
Yep.
So what would you say? I guess obviously the name of the podcast is Into the Storm. Like, what? I know you spoke about your father, losing him at really a tough time, being a young man, because as a parent, like, you've got, my boys are 35 and 31, my daughter's 17, and you never stop being a parent. Like,
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like, you stop, you don't have to change your diapers anymore. I guess around 3 or 4 for you, that was and then from there,
Cut this guy off, producer. I'm sorry.
but you know what I'm saying? Like, you're always kind of coaching them along and everything. But when they get out of the house, then there's adult life. Like, so there's always other levels. And to lose your father at that age is tough. And so
See, I think I'm a better father after the fact.
Yeah.
Like later in life, I believe. It's probably because, Ken, I finally grew up a little bit myself. You know what I'm saying? But I do feel like my relationships with my kids are the best they ever have been, and I feel like I do try to offer them, advice and things, and help them in different ways. And I feel like maybe I even failed when I was younger. You get so caught up in your music and your life, and it's like the kids, and I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a grandparent now. I don't know, but you get better at it.
I don't think it's failing. I think what it is, and I've always said this. I think I've said it on another podcast or two, but I honestly think you just do the best that you know how to do at that time.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? And then you get older and you learn more lessons and you see things differently, and you can kind of see it from a different view.
Right.
Because the way we thought at 20 isn't how we thought at 30. That's not how we thought at 40. It's not how we thought at 50.
Right.
So every time as we evolve, then, and you can't look back and say, now I think I failed. No, you did the best you knew how to do at that time.
Yeah.
But the fact, I think you have to make those mistakes.
Yeah.
Mistakes is what makes you grow, bro. Like,
Absolutely.
you know what I mean?
Well, I'd say one of my storms, like I've been married a couple times, my first, I had two kids. Two of my kids are from my first marriage, and I was married like 9 years. I think we separated at 9 years, so like 10 years, whatever, by the time we got divorced. And same with the second marriage. I just know what's wrong with that number, man. I give you 999, I'm waiting for my next 9. I'm kidding. No, and I had one kid with my and a stepdaughter from my second marriage. And by the way, I still have a great relationship with my second marriage. I mean, we're great friends and still care about each other a lot, But my middle son, I wound up getting custody of him when he was 13. He just turned 13. And this was like 3-4 months, like after getting separated, that last time. And I'm probably I don't know, 43 years old or something, I guess it's about 10 years ago, and I'm, so I have to, get the old apartment, you're starting over, the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of us have been there. A lot of your listeners have been there. And 2-3 months after that, I find out, his mom, things weren't going well, and not even with my daughter as well, but she was like graduating and getting ready to, go move out, but my son was 13 and now I have full custody of him. I'm on my own. Right. And, and one of my ex-wife, she was like, you've been married your entire adult life. You've never lived on your own. You can't do this. And I'm not bad about it. She'd be laughing about it right now if she was here in the room. She's like, you can't, you can't. You can't even live by yourself, blah, 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 blah. One of the little points of contention. I was like, all right. And then 3 months after that, I'm like, I'm doing good. And then drop. You got a 13-year-old you got to raise by yourself. And I'm like, oh, man. So I headed right into that storm, I'm like, I got to figure this out, and I'll tell you, man, that saved my life, man. Gave me purpose, and I feel like, as much as I look back and think of, dang, I probably made so many mistakes and whatever during that period when I was raising them on my own. You gotta understand, there's no, like he doesn't really have a mom. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so it's just kind of on me, and but man,
God,
I did good, man.
Yeah,
like,
man, that's awesome.
he come out good, so I don't know how he come out good.
But I think for a reason, and all of your experiences and how God molded your heart, bro. Like you had been through a lot, and you saw perspective, and you were who that kid needed at the time. Man, I think that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
like, I think a lot of things that we think are going to be hardships end up being like, we're someone else's blessing. Like we just look at, man, how can I be blessed? But sometimes you are the blessing to somebody else, and you don't see it that way. But then you fast forward 15, 20 years, and when you're 60 and that young man goes back and talks to you, like he'll have a story to tell you that's gonna shake you to your core, because he's gonna realize what you meant to him.
Well, I was doing a little personal development watching, Into the Storm podcast about a week ago, and you had a guest, Terrell, and he said something that I'm going to take that quote away from him. I'm going to steal it, I'm like, stealing. He said, you got to go through stuff to grow through stuff. And I thought that was a fantastic quote, I mean, and that's exactly right. You don't know how something saves you and makes you stronger, until you go through it. But you won't know it if you try to avoid it and you run away from it. Yep. And that's the whole purpose of this whole podcast.
Go right into it, Brent. Go right into it. That's
I love
what
it.
we try to push. Well, good deal, man. Well, as we finish up, man, tell me a quote or a motto or something that you live by that you like to share with everybody as you leave.
Well, probably the quote I say the most. Ken, you ready for this? It's not as fancy as you got to go through stuff to grow through stuff.
Yeah.
It's good times.
That's the whole thing. So we can go.
Right now, if they were watching this, they'd be laughing. They would really be laughing. And my friends too. They'd be like, yeah, he says that a lot.
Yeah.
But you know what? Ken, it's a good quote. No matter what's happening, Ken, no matter what is happening, I mean, Mom's on the edge of death. Like they're maybe getting ready to pull the plug. This is a month, about 6 weeks ago, so 8 weeks ago. And I'm like, good times, you know?
Yeah.
And when there's good times, it's still good time. It applies no matter what is going on.
Right.
And then sometimes when things are real intense, Ken, like whether it's for the bad or for the good, you're like, and my kids will laugh when we're texting back and forth, we're like, real good times. But they get it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's a good thing or bad thing. But you know what? It is a good time. No matter what. These are good times.
That's good stuff.
Even the worst of the moments. So it may sound like a stupid, moronic quote because I'm.
Well, no, man.
Yeah.
Last night at the Bison Tribe meeting, Cody Freeland, who's also a guest, he runs the UFC gym. He'd been on before, but Cody said this, like he was our cow for the week. So we have a cow. It's a conversation of the week.
Yeah.
So each member has a different week that they're the cow.
Yeah.
So his when he was speaking yesterday, he says, "Okay, imagine you're in your life. There's nothing else I can do.
Yeah.
Like you are literally 10 minutes before it's inevitable. You are going to die. Like you are taking your last breath. Like you're winding down. If you could take from that moment and go back and pick the worst day at any other given time of your life, if you could go back and live that day, think about how grateful you would be.
Oh, yeah.
You mean just to be in that the
be
worst
alive.
day, just because you're alive.
You know what I'd be saying on that last breath, Ken?
Good times.
Good times. And I'm out. You know what I'm saying? Like I'd be out. I'd be like, you said it. It's like, good times.
Good times, man. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I appreciate you tuning in. Joel, appreciate you coming in, man.
That's my pleasure, man.
And
I had a good
really,
time.
really had a great time.
Even though we didn't tell the mystery of why I'm the Taco King, but that's fine.
No way, dude. We skipped right through that. So
I think probably remaining a mystery is probably good.
really,
Yeah.
well, I'm gonna find out at some point.
I just
I'm
really
gonna
like
share
it's,
without you.
it's real. I'll just say this: it's real simple. I like tacos
good
and
times.
good times.
Good times.
You know, no man, no. You know, I just started posting like these taco memes back around the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's every Tuesday. I'd be like, I'm gonna drop a taco meme. I like tacos. No big deal. It was like really no big deal. There wasn't even forethought. There wasn't. Suddenly, people would start posting them for me.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, they were every Tuesday sending me messages. And it got so intense. Like there's not a day that doesn't go by, Ken. Not a day that goes by where I've gotten a dozen or 15 or 20 people messaging me about tacos. It got so weird, Ken. I'm like, what is going on? Like Christmas shopping, and I came by Taco Bell, and there's a picture of the rapper, and I just want you to know I was thinking about you. Merry Christmas. I'm like, are you serious? And Ken, I've been asked to have tacos by people I would have never had dinner with or lunch with. Wow. It happens all the time. Like last week, you know, I celebrated a taco anniversary with my, you know, with a good friend, and I had never gone out with her like
Taco
a year ago. Man, I've had models reach out. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like
taco models or just real
no,
models?
no, like just the most unusual. I'm using that as an example, but other types of people that I would have never.
Right.
Seriously, it opened a door of social stuff that I would have never. I didn't plan this.
I'm gonna tell you what. I had only seen you play a few times,
Yeah.
and I usually interact with the bands. Like I'm a friendly dude. Like I like to talk and tell you guys how much I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it's probably the third or fourth time I saw you playing, and it was Halloween, and everybody's dressed out. So it's Eric's band. Everybody's dressed out, and then y'all go up there, and you got regular clothes on, but just like a giant freaking like sombrero size taco. I was like, dude, how cool is that, dude?
It's just funny. It become funny. It's like a joke. The whole thing is like but I do like tacos. I really do love tacos. I mean, I like other stuff. I love sushi. That's why I have sushi Sundays with my son. Right. One of these days, I'm gonna pivot. I'm gonna start posting sushi memes every Sunday.
That's the beautiful thing. Yeah, just pick like fillets, like because they're probably paying for your tacos.
But when I was interviewed at Find Great People a couple years ago, I started working there, and the CEO, the owner of the company, he's like, you know, he's make smart question. You know what I'm saying? I'll get him on this one. No, I'm kidding. You know, it's like just behavioral. I just want to see how he thinks. You know, it's one of those kind of questions, situational. He goes, hot dog. You know, it's like sandwich or What did he say? I can't remember. But
Right.
is it a sandwich or is it something else? Whatever. I was like, I sat there and I looked at him, and on the inside, I'm like, don't do it, Joel. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Then, like,
Came out.
throughout all my life, suddenly, like, I just head through the storm because I have a thought, and I was like, it's a taco. That's what I said to him. And his eyes got big. I said, let me explain why. And I said, and I went through this whole thing. I was like, John, if I just said it's a hot dog or a sandwich, nobody would have cared. I said, but if I say it's a taco,
Right.
everyone will love it. And then I explained the whole thing about the taco, the weird thing.
Yeah.
I said, people are passionate about the tacos, and they
Right.
love me when I talk about the tacos.
Well,
Yeah,
the
that's
great thing
weird.
about tacos is you can take anything and put it on and just call it a taco.
That's right.
They can have a vine and
Ken-
sausage taco.
The thing when you've arrived is you'll understand is that everything is a taco. The universe,
It's just taco.
it's a taco. That's how time. It's not linear. It's a taco. It's a giant taco.
Tacos. Good time.
Okay, good times. I'm happy. I think the whole Bison tribe's new motto is good times. Love it, man.
Awesome.
Thank you, man, for inviting me.
Yeah, man, I had a blast. Guys, as always be yourself. Unless you can be a bison, then always be a bison. Till next time. Later.
Oh.